Hello, my fellow fictionites. Welcome to the I'm Just Fiction YouTube channel. Today, we've got a pretty nifty Clair Obscur character analysis for you, Maelle. We will be exploring all the wonderments of grief and the dangers of abstaining from it. The overarching world of Clair Obscur is one that thrusts us into a world fractured with grief. A world torn between forcing its characters into cruel choices or drowning their grief in an illusory canvas. Maelle is Clair Obscur's canvas of grief, reflective in the bristles of eternal bargaining, her voyage from act to act a brokered dream, an illusory nightmare. A rift where she's forced to face the painted mirrors of her reality, and fisher through the hellish utopia that is Lumiere. A utopia marked by the blissful ignorance of Maelle, and martyred by the awakening of Alicia. Let's venture through the storyline of Clair Obscur together, and delve into how Maelle is a perfect caricature of a painted grief, brushing over the cruelties of reality, to abstain from a loss too severe to concede as being a truth. From the dawn of the story, when we're first introduced to Maelle beside Gustave, looking upon the paintress wallowing on the other side of the fractured continent, in Act 1, we're warped into a kid-like playful persona between her and Gustave. That is until Gustave mentions his idealized dream of doing much more than throwing rocks, alluding to destroying and defeating the paintress. Interestingly enough, Maelle's first instinct was to meet Gustave with a subtle but crushing sort of doubt, reminding him of the fate that befell the other expeditioners before them. And from playing the game, we know that the fate was a gruesome one to say the least.
You know, hobbies don't always have to be useful. I'm enjoying the uselessness of today and readying my usefulness for tomorrow. And soon, I'll get to do a lot more than throw rocks.
That's what all the other expeditions said.
Hey, you know they gave their lives to lay the trail for us, right?
Yeah, I know. Sorry.
Yeah.
We observe a tightly woven sister and brother dynamic between Gustave and Maelle, a trust vulnerable enough for him to seek Maelle's advice on Sophie's gommage. And so we're left to ponder exactly, what does Maelle want? Why is she so gung-ho about entering an expedition with at least 9 years left until her own formal gommage? What is the source of this grief while living outside the knowledge and ignorance of her true identity of Alicia? It wouldn't be wrong to say that Maelle wouldn't have experienced grief of her own, having been orphaned at the age of 3, but as we'll see later, she alludes to this continuous sensation of the world keeping things from her. The world keeping something from her, a missing piece of the puzzle that wouldn't click into place. When Gustave speaks to Maelle on the pier during the Expedition 33 festival, she says that Lumiere is not my home, not the way it is for you. And when Gustave attempts to convince her to stay, she says, if anyone should stay, it's you. You have friends and family who want you here, suggesting that Maelle's prerogative is to sort of escape, and in this case, escape her isolation and what she views as this constricted plane feeding her self-designation as an imposter amongst many. Maelle's time in Lumiere shows that Alicia, even in her painted life, seeks to escape her imposter designation and wants to seek out that missing piece of the puzzle that she later suggested the world always seemed to be hiding or keeping from her. It is quite ironic to find that the one thing that Maelle was subconsciously seeking throughout her painted journey, living through the eyes of Maelle, was a way to break free from the ignorance of her painted version, which of course meant unfolding the masked reality that was Alicia. The white-haired man, a painted mask of Renoir, fighting to preserve the false reality of the canvas. Painted Renoir. We knew that anytime we heard that cane, that someone was going to get plastered on a milk carton or printed on a size XL t-shirt. Maelle is later discovered meandering in a manor located on flying waters. Having followed the direction of the message marked on the indigo tree, she's reunited with Gustave. This message later revealed to have been left by Painted Versa. Strangely enough, the question she asked when meeting Gustave is, are you real? The events at the beach were undoubtedly a traumatic experience for Maelle, forcing her to reflect on what death truly meant and scale the meaning and weight of the lives crossing paths with it. Are all deaths equal? Does one death matter as much as others? Those are the questions the audience is commanded to ask. This inciting event leaves more questions than answers about her existence and why she was made to survive the skirmish that all but wiped out the rest of Expedition 33. After the expedition set up camp, we're introduced to Maelle's first nightmare. We are flashed with a few frames showing Painted Verso and Julie from Expedition 58, I believe. Then a vision of Maelle's face bloodied and screaming at the paintress, which may represent her loathing for the paintress for having trapped her in this world reflective of her dead brother's grief, a constant but subconscious reminder of her guilt and naivety causing Verso's death. As Gustave and Maelle overlook the water, gazing upon the monolith, Maelle asks Gustave,
Death out here is not like death in Lumiere, is it? I thought I was used to losing people.
Death out here isn't like death in Lumiere, is it? I thought I was used to losing people. Now this is sort of the crux, the core of Act 2, forcing the reader to ponder that if you die complacent, as Gustave suggested was the culture of Lumiere, idly accepting the gamage, or if you sacrifice your life in pursuit of refining the world for the complacent, as the expeditioners on the beach did, which eroded Maelle's prior comfort of death, does that change the finality of that death, or the nature of death itself? Gustave's answer,
You know, that's the insidious thing about the gamage. It's predictable, almost gentle. It makes Lumiere complacent and accepting, but the gamage is equally violent than death. Death is just as final.
Interestingly enough, this is where Gustave warns Maelle that if death approaches, he wants her to run.
Look, if death approaches, I want you to run.
Which is a huge pit of foreshadowing and encompasses the overarching themes of Clair Obscur, which are lived out and breathed through Maelle, which in fact is Maelle running from her grief, and the consequences that arise from running from that grief instead of facing it head on. When you begin to pick apart Clair Obscur and track the characters from scene to scene, you begin to see the overarching theme consistently being reinforced. That is the importance of accepting one's grief and the reality of death that planted the seeds, even if that reality means forcing cruel choices. Gustave's responses to Maelle about death being just final and his warning to Maelle to run if death approaches allude to Alicia de Sandre's voracious internal conflict between accepting Verso's death and enduring the cruel choice to shatter the one fragment of him left behind, or to continue living a painted life beside the soul of her dead brother Verso, forever barring herself from having to accept the hellish reality of his death, or that scarred and voiceless life of Alicia. The expeditioners were soon directed by the chief of Jestrel's Golgra to find and seek out Eski's nest to find a way to get to the monolith. And God knows how many times I got filet mignoned by those fighting feet of fury.
What a lovely feat.
The expeditioners set up camp once more, and it's here that Maelle is struck by a waking nightmare and faced by both painted Alicia and painted Renoir, who issues a stark warning to take her friends and leave the continent, having blame being cast upon her from painted Renoir, who deemed her at fault for everything that was transpiring in her ignorance, without relaying so much as a trail of crumbs for her to track. Maelle voices her discontent to Gustave as they converse about the nightmare, stating that it's as if she's always missing something that everyone else gets.
I don't understand what's happening. And I feel like I never understood. Like, I'm always missing something that everyone else just gets.
And that she felt that when she was in Lumiere, she believed she never fit in and was out of place.
Lumiere, life never made sense, and I never fit, and now out here, when it was just starting to maybe feel good, then this happens, and...
The comfort she found was being dissipated by the nightmares, which essentially serve as this constant flux of foreboding, except the fragments of cataclysm they allude to are essentially mirroring the reality of her life as Alicia, an indestructible reality that endures negligible to the weight of suppression or attempts at repression. This interaction suggests that Maelle, throughout the course of this painted life, has been conflicted in unfurling the candor in her existence, the truth and reason she roams amongst the world, Lumiere, which she feels detached, isolated, and rather distant from. One can accept a reality they don't understand. This nightmare illustrated that to first accept one's grief, you must accept and or hunt for the source, which in Maelle's case is her true identity of Alicia. Ultimately, this chase aggravates Maelle's venture to sculpt an identity for herself, having been forced to chase one that already appears to be predetermined for her, leaving her to chase the missing pieces of a reality she never even wanted to awaken to. We're foraging through Eski's nest and flattening the old Grumpmeister in the other room, who shoots Kamehameha beams out of his mouth. We find Maelle in a sleeping nightmare back at camp, in between the expedition's journey to uncover Eski's lost stone, those who know not that they are not. This nightmare is unequivocally my favorite, both because of its poetic nature and the mass gravity of the thematic foreshadowing planted within, all of which is conveyed by the painted version of Alicia, the facsimile of Alicia as she is. And in Alicia's monologue carries forward the overarching themes of abstaining grief, in this case, reinforcing how ignorance blissfully spares the agony that coincides with that grievous torment.
I envy them, those who can't see, those who know not that they are not, and those who live, blithe and free, sins forgotten, and thus absolved.
In Maelle's case, it is that shell of ignorance that both torments her with a longing to mend the gap of arrogance and protects her from awakening to her crude reality of Alicia as she is. There's a longing to burrow and repress that which forces anguish upon us. Clair Obscur simply bolsters that innate yearning through painted Alicia's envy of being cursed with the knowledge of what her and her family truly are, a painted canvas of reality. Their sacred lives a mechanism for the paintress to abstain from facing the cruelties of her own reality, that Virgil perished in the fire. The divergence in this string is striking, a sleeping Maelle in her painted version wishing to be blessed with the gift of ignorance, all while ignorant of the fact that Maelle in view reflects a false image of Alicia as she is. Painted Alicia then voices her envy for Maelle, being able to eventually wake from the canvas world with a fresh dawn in her playground while they are left swimming in ink.
A fresh dawn in their playground, while we live in shadows, swimming in ink. We are but a fragile dream, a singular weed, resisting, ever resisting, that iron dirt, that eternal law. Those who can't see, those who know not that they are not.
This nightmare is reflective of Maelle's freedom of choice, to forge a path and identity for herself as Maelle or Alicia. The story's ending reinforces this notion that being tethered to grief doesn't mean the corrosion of one's reality. The choice to move forward to process the agony and the guilt stemming from the source of the grief is the individual's choice to make, and their choice to make alone. There's a chance to move forward and make the best out of the life you have left, or you can opt to run from death and drowning yourself in a pool of spinning ink. Oh my god, it's the lamp master. I beg you, please don't one-shot my expedition with your throbbing hard sword of light. When the expeditioners find themselves lingering in the stone wave cliffs hunting for Eski's stone, we're left with watching Gustave and Maelle conversing on the cliffs, leading to the moment that would transform Maelle's life forever. We all know that abstaining from accepting grief and the consequences that arise from the refusal is the recurring theme in Clair Obscur, primarily lived through the eyes of Maelle. And when Big Rig Renoir comes clumping through the hollows with his sword cane, we know that grief is just but one slice away. In Act 2, Gustave's fate echoed the finality of death, consistent with his own words to Maelle about how death is final, and however that death comes about is negligible to its finality, a reality that can't be transformed, something we find Alicia unable to ultimately come to terms with in her own ending. After Gustave's death, we witness Maelle processing the death of Gustave, wrangling with her suffering, and eventually beginning to engage with Verso in a conversation where they both share and unearth their desires to escape a life they didn't want. That escape being Maelle's longing to leave Lumiere, believing the world to be a better place outside of the protective dome, blissfully ignorant of the fact that escaping this life she claimed she didn't want meant reckoning with her life as Alicia, a fact that once realized threaded her back to seeking solace within the canvas world.
Why did you join the expedition? I mean, with the Gommage, I understand the rest of the team's decision, but you're half their age.
Out here seemed better than in there, at the time.
It's natural. Wanting to escape a life you don't want.
Escape. Yeah. That's what I wanted.
The The way to bury Gustave in the forgotten battlefield, we watch her breaking point capsize. All of those years of enduring a constant flux of loss, coming to a head with the loss of Gustave. After she loses Gustave, the audience witnesses Maelle's transformation of viewing death of her loved ones as a rite of passage to viewing death as an almost seemingly unacceptable reality to bear.
Everywhere we go, just death. Death and more death. Everywhere we go, just death. I don't want to see that anymore.
Look, Maelle,
I thought you would understand. You said you spent your immortality burying the people around you. Doesn't any of this bother you? And you. Gustave's dead. How can you keep going like nothing happened?
Maelle's grievous despair transforms into a searing call for taking vengeance against painted Renoir and paying the debt with his life. Maelle's strife and compounding loss of various families as an orphan and consistent and constant exposure to death on the continent shows us that death is not something to get used to, but rather a beast that one must become accepting of, a fate that one must endure should it claim their loved ones prematurely. This is the finality of death, a constant force within the nature of our world. Maelle receives a vision after she and the rest of the expedition clash at Painted Renoir's manor in pursuit of the painter's heart. Though of course I'm sure we've all had nightmares of clashing with Big Rig Renoir and his sword cane, shooting a load of lightning at our party and abracadabbering the boys out of the canvas. Maelle, in her ignorance, is tortured by the grief of her reality, and in being such, is also sheltered from the consequences of having to abstain from it. This event is but one of the many steps of mounting grief that Maelle must climb in order to patch and mend together her forgotten identity of Alicia as she is, and uncover what she believes the world to be hiding from her. That's something she said everybody seems to know except her. Painted Alicia, the mirror of Maelle's grief, echoes Maelle's reality by presenting a visage of the burning Descendre mansion, shrouding Maelle in an eerie swarm of Verso's cries as he burns to death in the fire after helping her escape.
What is that?
All of this is alluded to be a result of Maelle's naivety. Before drawing his sword to strike Maelle at the manor, Painted Renoir yells, "Why can't you just accept yourself?" There's ironclad reinforcement in Maelle voicing her devotion in seeking out and forging an identity for herself, escaping from a world where she thought she didn't belong, Lumiere. The greatest irony? After awakening to Alicia, she was so nested in the very identity of Maelle, ensnared in a constant flux of push and pull with reality, so entrenched in staving her grief that she could not part with the painted version of herself, even if it meant keeping her brother's soul enslaved against its own will. This of course highlights the erosive nature of grief. Even when abstaining from acceptance, even in ignorance, it's something that has the potential to crumble every pillar of stability should its nature be neglected rather than respected. As with the finality of death, demarcated by Gustave, it will remain looming and devouring as we see it nicking at Maelle, torturing her with cryptic cues, even in her ignorance of her life as Alicia through her nightmares. She who paints life. After the expedition is defeated at Painted Renoir's manor and fails in pursuit of securing the painter's heart, they must reconcile with the death of a fellow comrade caught up in Big Rig Renoir's Kamehameha wave, Noko. It's here that Clair Obscur bolsters one of the more recurrent themes across the story, that death is final, and one line in specific from Monoko tells us that the husk is not in tandem with the soul, and that which is lost forever.
Can you bring Noko back?
Partially. We can bring Noko back to life. But not all of Noko will return. It will be a different Noko. The one you knew is gone.
This later leaves the audience with the sensation in Maelle's ending that she's strumming around the revived, false painted versions of the people of Lumiere, her ideal Lumiere, her own ideal Gustave, her own ideal Sophie, and versions of the expeditioners as well. One core idea consistently reinforced within the story is that there is no such thing as a deathless life without suffering. It's the very power of the paintress to resurrect life within her canvas world that ensnares her and traps her from confronting her own grief, and the reality of Verso's fate, thus spindling into the neglect of her family in the real world. One could argue that this painted immortality and the knowledge of their false world is what even led painted Renoir, painted Alicia, and Verso's soul to suffer in the canvas world. Verso, of course, more than others. Reality, grief, there are rules and mechanisms of nature that cannot be painted over. In her death in the canvas world, the painter, sensing the presence of her daughter, awakens Maelle to the portrait of herself, the real portrait of who she is, and shatters the shell of blissful ignorance. The events of Clair Obscur teach us one clear thing, that to accept one's grief is to reconcile with one's loss, and to run from that loss, to recede into illusion and stave off facing that deficiency, is to wither in a rotting pit while the bittersweet shell of reality continues to revolve around you. It is Renoir, he who paints death, who invokes the flowers of the gommage, which flush Maelle out of the canvas world, and by proxy awakens Alicia's memories. Maelle, having returned to the canvas as a paintress, repaints Verso and confronts the real Renoir, her father. With knowledge of her scarred face and voiceless reality, Maelle is now made to set comparisons of her vitality within the canvas world versus her vitality in life back at home. This reinforces the notions and recurring themes that we see in Clair Obscur, that you cannot run from your reality or the grief that injects that plane of reality. Only abstain until time causes the mask to fray. Instead of fighting to uncover the truth of Maelle's lost identity, Maelle is now running from the reality that is Alicia, intoxicated with the life she's lived within Verso's canvas. The addiction of the canvas world is readily displayed by Aline, who, after getting kicked out of the canvas world by Maelle, finds her way back to join in the fight against Renoir. We see Renoir, the cruel reality, clashing with Maelle, a painted life of luxury, embarking on a crusade to absolve herself from the cruelties of that reality, even going so far as to tell her father, "This is my home now."
Papa, please. This is Verso's only canvas. You can't destroy the last piece of him that we have. This is my home now. You can't just decide.
Your home? After all that with your mother, you want to stay?
One might say she becomes just as, if not more, obsessed with preserving Verso's soul, even against his will, if it means that she can recede into a false reality, where she no longer has to live with the guilt and constant reminder of Verso's death resulting as a cause of her own naivety, so she can secure the chance to live out her life as Alicia, as she was meant to be, even if it means neglecting her obligations and real grieving family in the outside world. At the end of the fight with Renoir, she even begins to project onto him, saying that he just wants control of the canvas, and because he couldn't save Verso, he just wanted to save Maelle by destroying the canvas. When in reality, she was undoubtedly the one who wanted control of the canvas, regardless of the consequences that come with it. Such consequences that Renoir, her loving father, warned her about. Consequences that emerge with time. Maelle stated that destroying the canvas won't help us move on. It'll just deny us the one place that helped us feel again.
Precisely what's at stake. You want control. You want to feel like you're doing something. You couldn't save Verso, so you want to save us. Except you're not. Destroying the canvas won't help us move on. It'll just deny us the one place that helped us feel again.
The canvas world is much like any medium of escape, bred to bury and delay that which we deem as malfeasant or disruptive to our vitality and sense of equilibrium. It's a lure, driving compulsory obsession, as a dancing worm strums a bass to a hook. The fact that Maelle is compelled to sacrifice her life and forfeit her own mother's life for the mere promise of a dream world illustrates the hazard in escape. Her clinging to the canvas within her own ending, a life to paint, even after having witnessed Verso's soul eroding and him begging her to unpaint him, all to spare her a haven for repressed grief, signifies that suppressing and distorting the true essence of one's reality has the potential to devolve even the most sound of minds under a canopy of chaos, where repression and the incapacity to accept the world as it is versus the world as one wants it to be makes cataclysm, mayhem, and self-destruction the easel holding the canvas in frame. will reflect the ending that illustrates Maelle's innate desires, an incapacity to destroy Verso's canvas, and thus accept the cruelty of loss without being forced out of the canvas by Verso alone. In other words, the choice that Maelle made, regardless of Verso's actions. And that she becomes the lone god in the canvas, imbued with the ability to resurrect others at her own whim. Though these painted versions are not the same as the originals, an incomplete manifestation, almost akin to a puppet world eternally clashing with the finality of death, and the grief that finality lugs with it. Instead, death loses meaning, and the addiction is fed from staving off death to nurture an ideal world. In a sense, Maelle, as a paintress, evolves to view death as not something to be accepting of, but something cheap and friable. As cheap as painted Alicia's life became to her, who Maelle gommaged without a hitch, unable to withhold the subconscious craving to keep Verso to herself. The excuse of respecting painted Maelle's wishes for death was used as justification for the impulsive gommage. However, it's felled by Maelle's dismissal of Verso when he begged to meet the exact same fate. And so Maelle, Alicia as she's meant to be, clings to Verso's tormented soul to keep this fragmenting world sewn together, and ensures the existence of a realm of comfort where she never has to face the fact that her brother Verso perished in the flames. I hope you all enjoyed this character analysis of Clair Obscur. There will be more and many to come in the future for other games, as well as some more gameplay and walkthroughs going to be posted on my channel. If you guys enjoyed the content, make sure to crack that like button below, subscribe, share this with your friends, and I'll see you all in the next one.